So I want to be clear that the elimination of potentially mutually assured destruction as a policy doesn't eliminate nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons will still exist. They will still have a place in deterrence for various nations. The United States isn't just the only enemy. Russia has to contend with other enemies potentially. They have the ability to implement these weapons in a manner that bring up targets of opportunity that maybe defenses couldn't hit. And it also brings up the fact that even though we have a robust missile defense system, it's not perfect. The estimates are that anywhere between 15 to 25% of any kind of nuclear warheads would get through our defensive systems, especially in an overwhelming attack, which is probably what Russia would engage in. What I'm bringing up in my previous video was that the advancement of U.S. missile defense systems have created doubt within the Russians' ability to execute such strategic strikes on the United States. It brings up the doubt of whether the U.S. would actually be destroyed, which in this case, generally they would not be. So Russia has to rethink its calculus on how to engage with a United States that could defeat a first strike capability out of Russia while also conducting its own first, second, and third order strikes into Russia, and Russia could do nothing about it. That's the concern Russia has. But it brings up a separate thought process that I actually was thinking about a long time ago with regard to the advancement of technology and how the more advanced we become technologically, it's almost like the more we rely on the traditional tactics. So for the longest time, the United States, when we were operating in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had a massive technological advantage. We could basically operate on forward operating bases with everything from coffee shops to massive systems of collecting information, communications arrays, all spitting out various frequencies of electronic warfare data and things like that. And when we were fighting against an enemy that is so subpar, that's fine. However, the Russians, you can use that to their advantage. And when we were training other countries in Europe, NATO allies and partners, we had to go back in time almost when we were teaching them tactics, because Russia has the capability to detect electronic warfare spectrum. So if you communicate, you fire up your computer, you have light on your phone, you have these things that spit out a band of communications, or has any kind of electronic signature, or has any kind of thermal signature, or has is on the spectrum of detectable waves that you can see, you can also target that. So everything from cell phones to computer screens to hell, even generators generating heat had to be shut off, because with drone warfare, that's easily detectable. So what we resorted to inevitably was maps in the dirt. We had red lens flashlights opening up a paper map, conducting calls. They would do calls for fire in using map systems, and it was almost like the more we've marched through time to become more advanced, the more the countering of that advancement has meant that the original standard tactics still matter. And countries that rely on their tech, which I believe the U.S. was on that route where we were relying so heavily on our technological advancement, which it still has a place, especially in air power and missile defense, naval power, etc. But on the actual ground where the actual soldier is, we're seeing a regression to more and more focus on the actual standard warrior tasks and battle drills that were the original core foundation of the Army and the Marine Corps. Knowing how to read a map instead of looking at a screen, a Blue Force Tracker, FBCB2, or whatever the hell version you used, and it's basically a GPS system that they can't use that because, again, it's targetable. So what inevitably we were seeing is a regression, and that's kind of what I could potentially see where missile defenses, especially if we get to space-based or laser-based missile defenses, become so advanced that it renders any kind of missile systems obsolete. The only capability potentially would be to overwhelm the systems, and that's an Achilles heel that comes with such systems, that potentially firing more missiles at the defense system that a defense system can handle is absolutely an Achilles heel, and that still will be relevant. What concerns me with that, though, is then we just see an arms buildup of building more and more and more missiles versus defense systems, etc., until potentially the U.S. finds a directed energy system or some other kinetic system that works better than trying to have a finite amount of missiles to deal with an incoming nuclear threat. So I don't think that we are going to move into any kind of alternate warfare. Nukes will still be around. I just think that the more we march through advancement, I'm hoping two things happen. One, it renders many of the old ways of fighting both relevant and obsolete. And it's hard. And what I mean is, it's relevant that you still need to have the skills of terrain mapping and terrain reading and doing the basic soldiering, but also renders things like nuclear weapons obsolete because directed energy weapons can immediately knock out any kind of incoming missile. And I'm hoping that that is where the trend goes. I don't know, but I do know that the more we advance, the more it seems like the old tactics, the old World War II bringing out a compass and a map and a protractor matter yet again. And you can't escape that the value of those historical or that base of knowledge that comes from all of our forefathers that fought that way.